in Prince Rupert or Prince George and so on, so we say governments have a social responsibility. If Greyhound won't provide service, then it should be the federal and provincial governments get together and provide bus service to these people. We fully support the struggles of the Native people, the Aboriginal people in this country for their hereditary rights. Right now there's a blockade that's going on for months against Enbridge by the Utoshan people in northern BC, and a lot of other actions are going on. They're in the forefront of the struggle for our rights. When the First Nations people fight for their rights, they're fighting for the rights of all of us.
It all starts with respect. They're not a category of people that you deal with. They are the founding nation of the land that we all stand on, that we all immigrated to. It starts with a nation-to-nation approach. It starts with collaboration and sitting at the same table and understanding and collaborating on what are the needs and how can we work together to come up with solutions that work. We can't impose a culture on other cultures. We need to be mindful of one another's customs and conventions and traditions. So I think the mindset that they are a special group of people has to go. The mindset should be that they are a nation to be honored and respected and have an equal seat at the table. Then we need to also factor and acknowledge that we haven't done enough. We need to ensure that the boil water advisories get lifted. We've also, the Liberals, have committed to immediately launching the inquiry into the missing murdered women. It's inexcusable that should even be a conversation topic. That inquiry should have been launched quite a while ago. We also need to ensure that in parallel, while we're trying to heal our relationships, that we're bringing the provincial partners to the table as well as municipal partners, and also continuing to fund and increase funding in existing programs so that we can continue to make sure that education and access to education and skills training is available, supporting post-secondary education, investing more into the K-12 program so that every child in Canada gets access to the same kind of programming.
Okay, we get to start us off on a question a little bit more close to home here. Burquitlam West contains the majority of purpose-built rental housing. The last time the federal government really invested in affordable housing was in the late 60s, early 70s. There appears to be a great amount of pressure to redevelop the existing rental housing. So, how do you envision your party supporting affordable housing strategies in municipalities like Burquitlam?
Great question, and it's a critical affordability question for many people. An NDP government would invest in 10,000 units of affordable housing, market rental or social co-op housing. I also want to mention that we would look at renewing the mortgages on a number of co-ops that are about to lapse. Some have managed to find the funds to pay off their mortgages. Others are at risk. And I know from talking to some of the co-op housing agreements in our area, in Burquitlam and Port Moody, that there are some very nervous people about how the funding is going, where that funding is going to come from. We have had over the last 2 decades a steady decline in federal investment in social housing, in affordable housing. You can see that whether it's a conservative or liberal government, successive governments have pulled out of affordable housing. Under Tom Mulcair and the NDP, we would focus on affordable housing, again under a balanced budget, reorganizing our priorities, and ensuring that affordable housing and that we are a player, again with the provinces and the municipalities, to ensure that we are able to provide affordable housing for people in the Tri-City area.
I agree that housing affordability is one of the biggest issues, and there seems to be 2 categories, moving from the rental affordability to the actual home ownership, which is something that I think everyone wants to aspire to, and especially if they already own their home here in the Tri-Cities. They hope that their children will be able to aspire to own a home, and that any family that wants to move into the Tri-Cities and raise their family here can also afford a home. There's a number of ways to address this issue. The first approach for the Conservatives is getting help to those who need it most, through reducing the GST from 7% to 5%, through things like the universal child care benefit, which is putting money straight back into families who need it most. I've also been out there knocking on thousands of doors. Personally, now I've knocked on over 10,000 doors in the riding. I talked to one gentleman who was just trying to make ends meet, and he said the universal child care benefit was what brought him just over the top. He was a roofer, he had fallen off the roof, he had been injured, his wife unfortunately had a stroke, he hit a patch of bad luck. He one day, though, hopes to own a townhome that he had currently been renting. The provisions put forward by the Conservative government will help him in the meantime with the lower taxes, and in the long run, we're going to look at issues of foreign home ownership to see if people are just investing their money here and artificially inflating the cost of housing. Also, people can take out more from their RSPs to help on a down payment.
We say stop paying the rich, increase investment in social programs. Governments should be, we demand the restoration of full funding for social housing, including co-ops and so on. Another possibility would be a genuine publicly owned corporation, not this central housing and mortgage corporation, which is doing nothing for people, for homelessness and lack of affordability and so on. We need a publicly owned and controlled corporation that takes charge of the situation from coast to coast and makes sure that every single Canadian has adequate and genuinely affordable housing.
So I think it's, I mentioned our infrastructure investment plan, and I think that what's really important to note here is that what the Liberal plan has done is it's heard from mayors that say that we have numerous buildings that are in a state of disrepair that we cannot fix. Municipalities don't have the money to deal with that. We also have never had investment envelopes that are targeted towards specific spending purposes. We previously had the New Canada Build Fund, which was sort of like a one-size-fits-all. We're going to be putting that aside so that it focuses on roads and bridges and border gateways, and use the infrastructure money that we're proposing in 3 envelopes. Public transit, which helps everybody get moving and get to jobs. Social infrastructure, which is the key thing here. This is a national fund that we can tap into in Port Moody. I've been named to Justin Trudeau's economic team, along with Rhodes scholars, economists. Mark Garneau is on that team. He's our first Canadian astronaut in space. If a Liberal government forms and Port Moody chooses to elect me, we would have a straight line into the Prime Minister's office through my participation on the economic team. And I think it's really important that we consider that, because then we will get our fair share of that national investment brought right back here to fix the co-ops and the affordable housing units in Port Moody and Burquitlam itself.
Yeah, affordability is a critical issue. Supposedly in Burquitlam you pay the highest rents in Metro Vancouver, and you know, when you look at the housing prices, if you're in the market to buy, you also get a sticker shock. So there are definitely ways, and I hope that the new parliament will continue to support for co-ops. That's definitely a way to go. I also would like to see actually the big developers on a shorter leash, and with every counter that's going up, have a quota of affordable housing provided to the community, not necessarily a little park with 2 swings. That doesn't do much. So, having said that, I come from a country where actually the share of people who rent their homes is far higher than the share of the population who owns a home. It's roughly 65% of Germans rent their homes, and that's absolutely normal. I see a rise here of renters, mainly young people and young families, who are absolutely outpriced out of the market, so they actually have no other way to go. So we need to address those issues, and the federal government actually has the strength to set up frameworks to change all of this.
Thank you. Before we move into the next segment, a couple of things. First of all, we are accepting donations. It does cost us money to put this on, so if you'd like to help us out, there is a hat at the back. A reminder that if you are still here at the end, I would really appreciate you picking up your chairs and bringing them up to the front. And we're just going to take 1 minute here for our President Don to make just a few remarks before we move into the closing.
Thank you all for coming out, and thank you for the candidates. It takes courage to come up and represent your beliefs in front of public. Thank you. What really makes this is the people in the community, and we are asking that if If you're able to come out and help the Community Association, it's one meeting a month. Our annual general meeting is December 8th in Miller Park Community School. We'd love to have your thoughts on how to make the community better and raise our standard of living. Thank you.
At this point, we're going to ask each of you to give us a 2-minute wrap-up. That's right, yes, our timer says you can have 2 minutes. So, Fin, let's start with you, and we'll move down the other way just to mix it up.
I'd like to first off thank the Burquitlam Community Association for hosting this, all candidates, and thank all of you for coming out tonight. And I'd also like to thank the candidates for putting their names forward for their respective parties. In my opening remarks, I mentioned what an NDP government would do. So in my closing remarks, I'd like to remind you, as you go to the ballot box on October 19th, a few things to keep in mind. The Conservatives ran 6 straight deficit budgets in a row, including the largest in Canadian history. Stephen Harper has appointed more senators than any other prime minister, including disgraced senators Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallin, Patrick Brazeau. The Conservatives implemented the largest omnibus budget bill in Canadian history, which changed 69 laws at once, gutting the Fisheries Act, the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, and the Navigable Waters Protection Act, just to name 3. The Conservatives shut down Parliament and debate more than any other government in Canadian history. The Conservatives have been plagued with more scandals even than the Liberals, including the Senate scandal, and they've been caught cheating in the last 3 elections. The Conservatives have muzzled Canada's scientists. They've turfed Canada's health accord. They pulled out Canada out of the Kyoto Climate Change Accord. They're getting rid of door-to-door postal service and defunding the CBC. They've treated our veterans horribly and closed 9 Veteran Affairs offices. They've closed the Kitsilano Coast Guard Station, and they've attacked your basic human rights by passing Bill C-51. And there's still more. This government has been the least democratic in Canadian history, disrespecting Parliament, the Supreme Court, the media, and the people. I ask you on October 19th to vote for the change that you want. Vote for a caring